3 years later, they fired their Super Bowl winning head coach. They traded the highest paid QB in franchise history. And they traded down in the 2021 NFL Draft. What does it all mean now? Find out during the draft from the premier Philadelphia Eagles reporter, Derek Gunn. Watch, listen to Draft Takes with Derek Gunn across the JAKIB Media Network, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
All right, it's time, ladies and gentlemen. 7:30. So let's bring in John McMullen, our NFL Eagles insider. That light is shining at the end of this tunnel. And now it's fun. All right, I joke, but now it's fun. 2 days away, essentially 48 hours from now, we will be getting underway, kicking off the NFL Draft. Follow John at JF McMullen on Twitter. Johnny Mac, that light has to be as bright as ever for you, my friend.
Is it fun? Is it, Ryan?
I don't know.
I guess it's fun. 48 hours away, basically. We're almost there.
We're almost there. Coming down the home stretch, and here we go. The storylines, which we talked a little bit about last night, and you could really pick a night. What are the 49ers going to do? It seems to be Mac Jones, and then what really transpires from 4 to 11? That seems to be the popular subject here when talking about the NFL Draft. Has anything changed in your mind? We talked a lot about Kyle Pitts. We talked a lot about Justin Fields. Trey Lance is a little bit of a wild card. Any new information or anything that you want to throw out there?
Yeah, I'm going to throw out a little new information on the Eagles, but before we get to that, I do think 4 is sort of the linchpin. I joked in my mock draft, the only thing I'm going to guarantee is I'm going 2 for 2 for Lawrence and Zach Wilson. And then I'm about 85% sure I'm going to go 3 for 3 with Mac Jones. I guess there's a little bit of a chance San Francisco goes in a different direction, but generally when you give up as much as they did to go up to that particular spot, you have your target on one player specifically. And from early when that trade was made, the talk around the league was that it was going to be Mac Jones. So I don't think they're coming off that, and that gets us to 4 in Atlanta. And Atlanta could go a lot of different directions. They need an heir apparent to Matt Ryan. But I was on Rich's show earlier, and this is why I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. Well, 2 reasons. One, when you take a quarterback in the modern NFL in the top 5, there's so much pressure to get him on the field early in his career. And obviously, at number 4, it's really difficult to take a player and say, okay, you're going to sit for 2 years behind Matt Ryan, and then we're going to go in your direction. I mean, you can maybe do that in the 20s, which is what Green Bay, did with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. I could buy it there, but man, you can't do it at 4. So I don't. And then the second part is Matt Ryan, and one of the reasons I think San Francisco is going to take Mac Jones is, Tom Brady's 43. He's winning Super Bowls. Drew Brees just retired post 40. Phillip Rivers retired 39, however old he is. The modern NFL, the over-legislated NFL that protects quarterbacks, if you're a pocket quarterback, you can play forever because they're going to protect you. And we've seen it. And, I've made the correlation with Kyle Shanahan, who had tremendous success with Robert Griffin III as a rookie. And, people kind of forget how good RG3 was. And then he got hurt in the playoffs. And it was over. So the shelf life was so small. So I think not only does Kyle Shanahan like Mac Jones as, somebody, a facilitator, so to speak, who can run his offense. But he's also looking at having the guy for 15 years if he's making the right decision. So I think that's a lot of the reason Atlanta thinks, Matt Ryan's probably got more than 2 good years left in him in this era of pro football. So ultimately, I think they're going to go Kyle Pitts, and then the dominoes start to fall from there.
That makes sense with the Falcons. How about this? What about Jamar Chase to Atlanta? Does that make no sense? I mean, what's their situation with Julio Jones?
Well, there's been sort of speculation that they would be open to trading Julio, but I don't. Most of that is, trying to get a little bit of cap relief. Obviously, he's descending, and I get what you're saying. Replace the great receiver with potentially another great receiver. I don't think they're going to go in that direction, but we'll see. There's certainly a possibility. I mean, Jamar Chase is that type of player, and I think if he doesn't go forward, well, I don't think he's going to go forward, but I certainly think Cincinnati might take him at 5, which also I disagree with, but for different reasons. But worst case scenario, his floor is 6 in the Miami Dolphins. So, he's a really good player. I just think they're looking for a different type of player. They have good receivers, even outside of Julio Jones. I mean, they're good. Calvin Ridley inside, they have good receivers. So I don't necessarily think that's the direction that particular team is looking at.
The Mac Jones point that you bring up, and RG3, his rookie year, and he's mobile and a little bit too mobile, and that injury ended up being the downfall for RG3. But all your points make a ton of sense to me with Mac Jones. He can have a very long career. You look at the quarterbacks that are still doing it at a high level. They have the same style of play, if nothing else. But is that enough for a coach to say, or an organization to say, okay, this is the direction we want to go in? I mean, yeah, sure, you still have to believe in the guy. I'm not saying that. But you look at Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes. I mean, there's still a case to be made that it's a risky type of pick going Mac Jones.
No, I mean, there's a big case to be made that Trey Lance would be the better pick or Justin Fields would be the better pick, and they probably have the higher ceiling as a player. So, I mean, part of it is Kyle just likes Mac Jones as a player. I mean, that's a big part of it. It's not like you're going to take just a pocket quarterback over more of a dual threat. Everybody seems to be looking for the dual threat. But I think it's common sense. And that's, it doesn't have to be both ends of the spectrum. You don't have to get hurt at the end of your first year like RG3. That's rare, and you never come back. But I think everybody can understand the shelf life is relatively small. If you want to use Cam Newton, I mean, Cam Newton reached the heights of MVP and making a Super Bowl, and he's just physically shot. He's not the same guy because of the punishment he took. I mean, the shelf life is just much smaller. There's no way of getting around it. If you're going to play that style, if you're going to be the dual threat that's all the rage, you have to know as an organization that shelf life is smaller. So you got to start that clock over again. And it's hard to be Green Bay. We had Andrew Brandt on Birds 365. I've told you before, Ryan, I said the Packers fans are the most spoiled fans in the world because they've had Hall of Fame quarterback play for 30 years and counting, uninterrupted for 30 years and counting. And that's why they drafted Jordan Love. They're trying to make it 45. I don't think it's going to happen. Lightning already strike twice. To ask Lightning to strike 3 times, that's really pushing your luck. But we'll see. It's, as we know, we're talking about it every year. How many teams need a quarterback? We're talking the 5 quarterbacks potentially going in the top 10. You want to be doing that in a 5-year rotation, or do you want Tom Brady for 20 years? Do you want Drew Brees for 15 years? Do you want Phillip Rivers for 15 years? That's sort of what I'm saying. Those guys have just long lifespans. And I'm not even saying Mac Jones is going to be that, but the potential to be that is there, where the other guys, they might be MVPs, and it might be great for 6-7 years even, but the shelf life isn't going to be as longer. It's just not.
Why every year is so many teams, and this may sound stupid or simple, posing this as a question, but why are so many teams every year looking for a quarterback? Is it just as simple as, John, the talent isn't out there and it's really tough to find the guy? Or is it there's too much focus maybe on the front end and not enough on the back end with these teams that maybe don't need one right away to go and look for a guy? Because we see, I mean, how many starting quarterbacks, John, this year are selected later than the first round? A lot of them. It happens every year.
Well, I wouldn't go that. I wouldn't say a lot. I mean, there's the obvious exceptions to the rule, and it starts with obviously Tom Brady at 199. I mean, that doesn't happen a lot. Russell Wilson in the third round, that doesn't happen a lot. It's still, if you're going to find a star quarterback, it's usually going to be in the top 10 or certainly in the top half of the draft. Your odds, I would say, are much better to do it in the top half than to find Russell Wilson, never mind Tom Brady, in the sixth round. You're generally not going to find Hall of Fame quarterbacks in the sixth round of the draft. So those guys are the outliers. But as far as why is everybody looking, Trey Wingo we had on Birds 365 today, he made a great point, which I hadn't thought about before. When they shifted to the rookie salary cap in the 2011 CBA, you no longer had these monster contracts for these number one overall picks. And Sam Bradford, in fact, was the last of the so-called bonus baby quarterbacks when the Rams selected him number one overall. Was the last one. Then he went into the rookie salary cap. And it was much more financially feasible. It scaled back those contracts so much that you could afford to move on from quarterbacks more quickly. But Trey also pointed out that's not necessarily a good thing because it speeds up the decision-making process, and sometimes it takes time for quarterbacks to improve and get better, and they have hiccups, and everything's not in a sense. You might, it might be more like an EKG. It might go up, it might go down, and a lot of times these teams are just pulling the plug. Probably the best example of that this year is Sam Darnold. The Jets take a quarterback in the top 5, and a couple of years later, they're taking a quarterback at number 2 overall. And you could make a really strong argument, a really strong argument that Sam Darnold was not put in a position to succeed because of the head coach. And we'll see. He'll get a second opportunity in Carolina. And we'll see. Ryan Tannehill, all you have to look at is Ryan Tannehill. The same thing happened in Miami. They're saying, well, this guy's terrible. Let's get rid of him. He gets away from Adam Gase. He turns into a star in Tennessee. It happens. And they pulled the plug. And you could argue they pulled the plug way too early on Ryan Tannehill. And we'll see, as I said, about Sam Darnold. So it kind of works both ways. You can move on quicker, and we've seen it with Winston, James Winston, Marcus Mariota. Now we've seen it with Jared Goff, Carson Wentz. Teams are willing to turn the page more quickly. And obvious mistakes, which I would call somebody like Mariota, that's a good thing. And less obvious mistakes, say what you want about Carson and Goff. They both got their teams essentially to Super Bowls. I know you have that weird disconnect with certain Eagles fans that say Carson didn't, even though they were 12-2 on the game he got hurt, in the game he got hurt when they beat the Rams. So he had a big part of it, a big part of getting that team to the Super Bowl. And Jared Goff got his team to the Super Bowl. you could argue they turned the page way too quickly on those guys, but sort of the modern NFL.
There's been, since the year 2000, John, there's been 60 quarterbacks taken in the first round, and you've rattled off a bunch that obviously have panned out. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes, Big Ben, Rivers, Eli, Lamar Jackson. I mean, the list goes on for guys that, they're pretty damn good. But then you have Paxton Lynch, Jamarcus Russell, Brady Quinn, Jake Locker, Manziel, Josh Rosen. I mean, the list goes on. So it works both ways. Plenty of guys that are great. So I guess what I'm getting at there is who could be a guy that turns out to be a bust, and who's a guy that you feel really strongly about that's going to be around for a long time as a starter.
Well, I mean, I think the one is obvious. I mean, everybody in this league loves Trevor Lawrence, and I'm talking personnel evaluators. And the only question is, is he the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck, or are you going to go all the way back to Peyton Manning or John Elway or somebody like that? I don't see any way he's not going to be a really good quarterback in this league, barring injury or something of that nature, which is always sort of the stipulation you point on anything. And then the other guys, I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, if you're hitting on 50%, you're doing probably good. And if there's five guys going in the top 10, I don't know if you ever saw Knocked Up with Craig Robinson.
Oh, yeah.
You got to go 2.5 people are going to be successful in 2.5 points. So, there's going to be, if you're getting 3 of those 5 guys successful, you're ahead of the game, and that means 2 are unsuccessful. And I got to be honest with you, I tend to look at where they're going to land. So, what is Robert Saleh and Mike LaFleur going to do for Zach Wilson? Kyle Shanahan, Mac Jones is going to a good spot, man. There's not, other than Andy Reid. If I were going to rip off best offensive minds in the NFL, Kyle would be number 2. So I like that spot for whoever. If it's Mac Jones or if it's somebody else, I think they're going to have a really good opportunity. And then with Trey Lance and Justin Fields, you got to see who's going to take him. I mean, if New England gets up there, I think it's a positive development. If it's certain other teams, it's not as positive.
Talking with John McMullen, just like we do every night right here on The Fix at 7:30. Follow John on Twitter at JFMcMullen. Make sure you are subscribed to the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. All of the NFL draft coverage this week coming out of the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. So stay up to date and subscribe. Something that you retweeted earlier from Ed Werder, and I thought this was interesting, coming from none other than Jerry Jones. He says college players who opted out are, air quotes, compromised prospects for the Cowboys evaluation process. Expand on that a little bit, John. That's interesting.
Well, I mean, that's up to the individual, and if the Cowboys feel that way. I mean, Daniel Jeremiah talked about there's certain guys. Greg Rousseau is probably the best example of somebody who's opted out and has taken some hits for it. But there's a lot of context to it because he also didn't have the greatest pro day in the world, and he only played one season, essentially, at Miami, and had some injury concerns before that one season. So there's a lot that goes into it. Now, at the top of the draft, I mean, Jamar Chase opted out. Nobody's questioning him. I mean, nobody. It's just a matter, as I said, is he going 5 or 6, pretty much. Nobody say, "Ooh, I wonder what Jamar Chase opted out." I mean, I wouldn't take him off my board. I wouldn't take Penei Sewell off my board. So I think you're doing a disservice to yourself if you're taking talented players like that off the board. I understand. I mean, it's not great. You'd prefer somebody got more experience. You prefer somebody played You don't want somebody even at that young age sitting for that long of a time without actual live reps. So I get it, but I mean, when you're that talented, when you're top 10 talent, I mean, I'm not gonna take people off my board because they opted out. I just think you're hurting yourself by doing that.
Last week I asked you about, a player that is a safe pick for the Eagles potentially at 12, maybe a bold prediction, and then the most likely. So 2 days out, I'll ask you that question again. And I asked you last night, and I'm going to do this all week. Does it stay the same for you? And you can throw in like a bold prediction for Philly.
Bold prediction is they trade up to number 8 with Carolina to take Patrick Surtain. I've heard that from a number of different people today. That's where they're looking to go up to, and they're looking to go up to get Surtain because they think the Cowboys are going to take him at number 10. So that's my bold prediction. I put that in my Eagles mock draft today on Sports Illustrated. I still have Slater. Remember, I think, when you say things like that and people assume far too often, that, you want to trade up, it's that easy. I mean, the other side has to agree as well. So it isn't that easy. So there's no guarantee they're going to be able to get something like that done. If they have to stay at 12, it's interesting. I went down the entire list, and we started at 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you start, 5 and 6, Miami traded Eric Flowers today. So I can guarantee you Chase and Sewell are going 5 and 6. I just can't guarantee you which one's going where. If the Bengals go Chase, and they should go Sewell because it's more important to protect the quarterback than get him his friend to throw the football to. But the Bengals are not known for smart decisions. So if they take Chase, I think the Dolphins will take Sewell. The Bengals take Sewell. I think the Dolphins take Chase. And then the Lions are sort of a prime position to trade up if you want a quarterback. We'll see if anybody does that. Carolina's at 8, and that's where the Eagles are trying to get to. And then you have Denver at 9, which probably wants one of the quarterbacks, and they might be able to sit there and get one of them, which I think is interesting. I didn't think many people thought that would happen. You talk about the Cowboys, they probably want a defensive player. They want Surtain. If they don't get Surtain, they'll probably go J.C. Horn. Then you talk about the Giants. I think the Giants are going to make their fans very angry and take an edge rusher, whether it's Kwity Paye or Jalen Phillips. And then you got the Eagles at 12. And I did not believe there was any way, anyhow, that Rashawn Slater would fall to 12. I mean, if I'm the Eagles and I can't trade up, I have to take that kid. I have to take him at 12. Or, worst case scenario, you trade down with the Chargers or Vikings because they're 13 and 14, and they both desperately need offensive line help. So maybe they're willing to jump up and make sure they get Slater. So a lot of things can happen, but I think plan A for the Eagles is to get ahead of the Cowboys and to get Patrick Surtain.
All right, just a few more minutes here with our NFL Eagles insider, John McMullen. Here's a name that I haven't brought up recently. You ready? Zach Ertz. Let's talk about him with the little bit of time we have left. What's the latest around him? Last time we talked about him, there was maybe a small possibility that, hey, he could be back in Philadelphia. But the draft 2 days away, is he going to get moved at some point over the few days of the NFL draft, John?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be an Eagle by Sunday, by the end of Sunday. He might even be traded before. I think the Eagles are going to attach him to a pick to try to go up. Not necessarily what I was saying in that first round, but I do think if the Eagles, for instance, take a Surtain or take a Horn If they get a player like that, then they have to really think about getting an X receiver at 37, and you don't necessarily have the capability to do that if you just stay there. So I look at Buffalo, which has wanted Zach Ertz, which has talked about acquiring Zach Ertz. Maybe you can attach Zach to 37 and give him another pick, and later in the draft, one of the 6th-round picks, and go up 7 spots to the end of the first round. Then maybe you can get a Terrace Marshall from LSU. That would be, I think, a pretty good scenario for the Eagles, and maybe they could get that done. But I do think at some point Zach is going to be attached to a pick. Might be the 4th-round pick they got from Miami to go up to the 3rd round if they target the player. Somewhere, some way, they're going to attach him, and I think he's going to get traded.
Yeah, that's just been lingering over Eagles fans and I'm sure the organization here for long enough. So I would tend to agree with you, as I always defer to you, that Ertz is going to get moved here at some point once the draft gets underway. Real quickly here, John, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. The first round is the focus. Thursday night it all starts, but day 2 for the Philadelphia Eagles, just a quick synopsis, and maybe we can get a little bit more into the Eagles draft from top to bottom tomorrow night. But fill us in as quickly as you can just about after number 12, the thought process for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Well, yeah, they have 37, as I mentioned, and I think in a lot of ways that those 2 picks are kind of joined together because, as I mentioned, if you do go defense, if you do go corner, then you almost have to go receiver. If you do go offensive line, as I mentioned, if somebody like Slater falls, then you could go receiver, you could go corner. There's probably a little bit more avenues you can go. And then, if it's somebody really off the wall, like an edge rusher, like a Pay, then you got to start thinking about the one necessity that the Eagles got to come out with, probably with a body somewhere in the first 2 days, is corner, because they didn't address it at all in free agency, which I was a little surprised. I thought they'd bring in sort of like an Eric Wilson-like signing, or, somebody maybe not great, but at least you can throw them in there as a placeholder. They don't have anything outside to play opposite Darius Slay. So if they're not getting one early, they got to get one in the 2nd round or the 3rd round. The good news is it's a pretty deep position in the draft, and they have 2 picks in the 3rd round, and they have their 2nd round pick, so they should be able to get it done.
John McMullen, you can find him everywhere, starting every night at 7:30 on The Fix. Follow him at JF McMullen on Twitter. Birds365. You have to tune in every morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. with John and Jody Mack. They have excellent guests, great insight between the 2 of them. Add in the great guest list. It's must listen and watch. SI.com, PhillyVoice.com. You get it all with Johnny Mack. All right, man. We'll do it again tomorrow night on Draft Eve.
Yeah, Draft Eve. How exciting. One more to go, right? And we're there. Well, 2 more. We'll do one, I guess, before the draft starts.
There you go. We're close, my friend. All right, we'll talk to you then.
All right, buddy.
Later.
Talk to you.
Later. There he is, Johnny Mack. Good stuff. Per usual. All right.
3 years later, they fired their Super Bowl winning head coach. They traded the highest paid QB in franchise history. And they traded down in the 2021 NFL Draft. What does it all mean now? Find out during the draft from the premier Philadelphia Eagles reporter, Derek Gunn. Watch, listen to Draft Takes with Derek Gunn across the JAKIB Media Network, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.